In Section 13, we're going to provide a more visual portrayal of direct-to-store, much like we did with Buyer's Console, and we will also do with transload. This is 3PL operations and service portfolio. Let's throw out a couple of quick reminders as to how we set up these visual aids. When we talked about Buyer's Console, we pointed out the circle around the red X. That means the steps, the physical steps in a transportation process that a particular model skips, as we see here, and the name gives it away, direct-to-store. On the right-hand side, there's no transload operation at destination, stripping ocean containers, and there's no shipping to regional distribution centers because it is a direct-to-store model. It is a DC bypass model. So our big green arrow goes from a CFS at origin all the way out to stores. Let's portray the model, and then we'll look at some of the key factors and service offerings of the 3PLs down in the lower left-hand corner. Just like Buyer's Console, origin vendors are sending cargo into a CFS. Either before goods arrive or after they arrive to the CFS, the importer in the United States is sending split instructions specific to vendors on how to divvy up, how to divide cargo that is being allocated to a number of stores. And there will be cargo from multiple vendors in single containers going to stores. Containers are stuffed at the CFS. We engage in ocean transportation, IPI, as we see in the slide, inland point intermodal. Doesn't have to be that way, but it does make sense. Goods clear customs at the first port of entry, and then they are railed, usually, but may be trucked out to retail stores. That's what direct-to-store is. And once again, skipping where we see our red X's, no transload at destination, no deliveries to regional distribution centers. Hence the name, direct-to-store. What are some of the considerations and operational offerings of a 3PL within this model? They're very similar to Buyer's Console, so we can run through them fairly quickly. PO management, we've talked about that incessantly. Vendor coordination, where the 3PL that's running the CFS is talking to the vendors. When, Mr. Vendor, are you going to ship purchase order 1234? Is it complete? Do you require any additional services? That type of coordination. There is inland transport to the CFS, and depending on the Incoterms rule, either the vendor or the importer pays for that. Naturally, CFS receiving, quality inspection can be conducted on behalf of the U.S. importer, at least a visual inspection of the cargo. There's that FCR issuance. And any value-added services, special packaging, additional labels, things like that. Naturally, there is docs preparation, documentation preparation. Either the vendor is doing the commercial docs for store-specific containers, or the CFS operator can do that. Booking coordination with the steamship line, container spotting at the CFS because we have to fill those store-specific containers, drayage from the CFS to the port, export customs clearance from the country of origin, and, depending on the services that an importer signs up for, that 3PL operator can do AMS filing and importer security filing. Continuing to the right in the realm of ocean transportation, as we also saw in Buyer's Console, the importer, should they decide to integrate services, can engage the 3PL to help manage a service contract, which is to say make bookings with the carriers that the importer has a direct service contract with. Certainly, the importer can use NVOCC services from the same 3PL as long as they are licensed by the FMC in the United States, ocean bill of lading, and in our case, in an IPI delivery, a through bill of lading, and inbound trucking. At destination, should the importer choose, can use the same 3PL to do the customs clearance. They don't have to do that, but they certainly can. This is a reasonable portrayal of what a direct-to-store model looks like. Taking that conversation to a more detailed level for direct-to-store, here we'll talk about responsibilities, charges, and even more observations. The slide looks similar to Buyer's Console in terms of its visual structure, but it's actually different in the sense that goods aren't being sent to a DC in the United States. They're being sent to a store. As we see on the right, we're not talking about regional DCs. It's store 1, store 2, store 3. Maybe there's 50 stores. Maybe there's 500. It all depends on the importer. Let's begin on the left. Our suppliers are sending cargo related to specific purchase orders into the CFS. Containers are stuffed based on the split instructions of the importer. at the CFS. They are shipped out. Goods arrive at a destination port. In our model, we made reference to IPI moves. Goods are cleared at the destination port and then continue on to inland points in the United States under the same bill of lading, probably by rail, out to store 1, store 2, store however many there are. Let's look at our supplier responsibilities. Segregation of cargo per importer instructions by store. And as we've said probably too many times now, the split instructions, the segregation of cargo instructions, are going to come either before goods are sent to the CFS or after. If it's before, the cargo and the docks have to be segregated by the supplier. The merchandise has to be delivered to the CFS, and the supplier is going to want their FCR, forwarder's cargo receipt. Some charges to consider, which will be divided pursuant to the chosen Incoterms rule. Inland freight to the CFS, generation of the forwarder's cargo receipt, export customs clearance, AMS and ISF filing, all things that are very consistent with what we talked about in buyer's consol. Any CFS charges as well, value-added services, labeling, packaging, etc. If split instructions are provided only after goods arrive at the CFS has to have commercial docks preparation capabilities, BL issuance, fee, that's a charge of course too. By store, inland freight to the port for all of those containers, and any THC terminal handling charges. We have a bunch of observations to make here. Moving to the right, we have yet another broken record alert. The Incoterms rule must be explicit because the charges have to be divided properly. As an example, clear agreement on who pays CFS fees. Remember, CFS charges are based on a per cubic meter basis, and they can be pretty expensive. What are the rules around FCR issuance? Needless to say, coordination between supplier and CFS operator is critical. Online visibility into orders at the CFS is very helpful. That web-based trading platform that the importer can go into and say, hey, what POs are actually in the CFS? As we also spoke of previously, we have to recognize and take steps to meet the multiple cutoff times that happen in a CFS. Cutoff time to the CFS to make a certain sailing. Cutoff time for a container to the port terminal to make a certain sailing. To get the ISF filing done in time. Cutoff coordination when working with a CFS, be it direct-to-store or buyer's consol, very important. Moving to the right, who is responsible for preparation of the commercial docks? That has to be very clear. We want to have explicit rules on free time at the CFS. We'll say it one more time. A CFS operation is not a storage operation. It's in and out within a couple of days. If for whatever reason cargo remains in a CFS for more than a week or something beyond that, the charges start to accrue for storage. Somebody has to pay for that. We should use container load plans for our store-specific deliveries so the store manager and whoever's receiving the container knows what they're getting and where in the container it is. We said this before, IPI moves, very effective with direct-to-store. And we also want online tracking, not just for cargo while it's on the ocean, but also from the destination port, perhaps on the rail, out to wherever the store is, Cincinnati, to go back to a previous example. We can see lots of considerations here around direct-to-store, lots of similarities, at least at origin, as it relates to a buyer's consol model. The big difference is buyer's consol, typically the containers go to a regional DC, direct-to-store, they go to a store. We're going to move on from here. We have a couple of slides to wrap up direct-to-store, and then in the next section, we'll go to transload. Let's run through some of the value-added services because we like to be thorough in our presentations that can be offered at a CFS specific to direct-to-store. The direct-to-store model features the benefit of the CFS providing some of these value-added logistics services. A full-service 3PL that operates a CFS can offer the following: in wearing apparel, putting garment on hangers for shipping, affixing retail price tags and barcodes, as we spoke of previously, any type of retail-ready packaging, and also, it's a pretty sophisticated service, but it's called building end displays for stores. Putting merchandise on a pallet designed as an end display that one would see in a retail store, putting it on the tail end of a container, and when the container gets delivered to the store manager, whoever's helping to offload the container, takes that end display, puts it out on the floor. We'll see more about that in just a moment. We want to mention it here too. As a trade tip, when evaluating potential 3PL/CFS partners, insist on seeing examples of these value-added services. Last slide in this section, a real-world example, retail-ready value-added services. The country's largest importer and retailer of home goods finds itself spending an inordinate amount of money at its regional distribution centers on making goods retail-ready for stores. Not only is this expensive, but the retailer is finding it increasingly difficult to even find employees for its DCs. It's costly, but it's costly only if you can find people to do the work. Given this double whammy, how can the retailer look further upstream in its supply chain for a solution? Over the course of the last 20 years, arguably even longer, large retailers have become more and more creative with engaging 3PLs at origin to provide value-added logistics services. Depending on the size of the retailer and its level of technological sophistication, most origin 3PLs that operate CFSs can offer a full portfolio of retail solutions for a direct-to-store program. In our last paragraph, we have a few examples. For example, it is quite common to see CFS operations throughout Asia providing packaging, barcode, and price tags to items. Another service that has become popular is the building of end displays that are loaded at the tail end of an ocean container. We talked about this in our previous slide. When a container arrives at a store, the end displays are already on shrink-wrapped pallets that are then moved via a hand jack out to the store floor where they are immediately put on display. Pretty sophisticated stuff, but it works, and the service is available out there. That wraps up our analysis of direct-to-store. Upon our return, we go on to a very popular model called transload.